Welcome to the Give Me Liberty podcast of the Standing for Freedom Center at Liberty University, where we defend life, liberty, and truth to ensure the foundations of freedom exist for the next generation. One of the most critical things that come along with that is life itself. We're talking about life, liberty, and truth. Life is fundamental. God is the author and the giver of life. And I am joined by a very special guest, president of the Foundation to Abolish Abortion in Texas, and that is Bradley Pierce. Bradley, welcome to the Give Me Liberty podcast. So great to see you, brother.
Thanks. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I want to commend the work that you're doing. There are many others around the country who are speaking up for life. Men, not just the women, but men who are speaking up, who understand what is at stake, that we are not trying to sort of coddle some or save some precious corner over here dedicated to the sacrifice of unborn babies, dedicated to the ministry of death, dedicated to the culture of death, to the blood cult of death. There is no quarter when it comes to life. That we're pursuing every avenue that we can as Christians under the lordship of Jesus Christ to abolish abortion in this country. We know it takes time to do that. We know that it's not going to something that's going to happen sort of overnight, but we have to push on this Overton window, this idea that abortion is acceptable, especially among the so-called pro-life camp. And I mean those who have acted and behaved almost like controlled opposition in many ways, that have said, hey, we're okay with a little bit of abortion. We're okay with just a little bit of baby murder, because it's unrealistic to assume that we would ever have a moral society, a civil society, ordered in such a way that children would be protected at the moment of conception and natural birth all the way to death, right? Natural death. So you are pushing on this. I want to talk a little bit about your foundation. Give me a bio of who you are, Bradley, before we talk about this bill.
Yeah, well, again, I appreciate you having us on or having me on. So just a little biography of myself. I'm a Christian, saved by the grace of God. That's the most important thing about me. And my wife, Cindy, and I are homeschool graduates ourselves. And so now we homeschool our children. We have number 12 is on the way. And
Whoa.
So we're very, very blessed. And so life is very busy.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And then I'm also the president of the Foundation to Abolish Abortion, and then here in Texas, help run as the president of the Abolish Abortion Texas. And so we're fighting for abolition, equal protection of preborn children, and protecting them with the same laws that protect all the rest of us.
That's awesome. And by the way, I just want to comment, so I don't want to distract the audience here, but is that a Braveheart sword over your right shoulder? Is that like the William Wallace? Okay.
Yes, that is.
So I
Wallace,
recognize that. Yeah. I recognize that. I'll say, kind of going back to, our sort of original founding of the Freedom Center was once called the Falkirk Center. And so it was kind of a portmanteau to Braveheart, and Randall Wallace, who was a writer out of Lynchburg, wrote that movie script. But I love that sword.
That was a gift from some friends of mine.
That's an amazing gift. So they're going to be lifelong friends.
Definitely.
So tell me so Bradley, 12 kids, that's not just enough for a basketball team or, a baseball team. You got enough for like an 11-man football squad with a 12th man, like honorary kid over on the sideline to go in, put me in, coach, anytime. That's changing civilization. That's you growing, towards the future here. My compliments, first of all, to your brave wife. That's incredible. But also to you, sir, for leading your household and growing your household and fulfilling the creation mandate. So Bradley, tell me a little bit. So in terms of Texas HB 2197, tell us a little bit about this fight for the equal protection of the unborn in the Lone Star State.
Yeah. So this year, we Representative Brent Money solid Christian man is carrying the bill here to abolish abortion, and it's something that we've been working on. There've been bills introduced here in Texas since 2017, every session that we've had, and we're seeing progress made. It's slow progress, like you were talking about earlier, but this session we saw 20 other legislators sign on to that bill, and and also that bill was granted a committee hearing by the chairman of the committee where that bill was sent, House Criminal Jurisprudence Committee. John Smithy is his name. But that the committee hearing didn't happen because the one of the pro-life groups here in Texas, Texas Alliance for Life, actually came out against the bill and came to Chairman Smithy and convinced him to pull the hearing for the bill. And I'm getting a little ahead of myself, actually, just to kind of tell folks kind of what the bill does. It's really a very, very simple bill. It just says that life begins at fertilization, which is actually already the law in Texas. We actually don't have to have law for that. That's actually already the law. We already have life defined from fertilization. It's already considered homicide to take the life of a child at any point after their life begins from at fertilization. But then they've written into the law when they did that in 2003. They wrote in there that this law does not apply to conduct committed by the mother of an unborn child. And so if a mother takes actions to intentionally cause the death of her own unborn child, then that's currently exempted from the definition of homicide, and that's excluded from any prosecution for homicide. So the result of that is that although we don't have Planned Parenthoods in Texas anymore after the Dobbs decision, after our trigger bill went into effect, we still have legalized abortions happening by self-induced abortions. So women ordering the pills from out of state, getting them delivered here, taking them here. And that means that it's also still legal for men or parents or whoever to pressure women into abortions because it's legal for the women to do the abortions. And so it's not illegal to pressure someone as long as you're not threatening them with violence, right? It's not illegal to
Mhm.
encourage or even pressure someone to do something that's still legal for them to do. So that means that children in Texas can still be murdered, and people can still coerce women into doing that in the state, and that's not equal protection, right? We don't have
Right.
that for born people. Just like people have seen even here recently, there was a woman who, had a baby and then slit the baby's throat here, and just last week that was news around the country,
It's
and
horrific.
um, and that should be illegal, right? We shouldn't be writing laws that say it's legal to murder your child as long as your child hasn't been born. And so Representative Money's bill, HB 2197, would just simply remove that exception, right? Really, the main part of the bill is simply repealing that. So that way, the exact same laws that protect the lives of born people would also protect the lives of people before they're born.
And going back, I mean, there's been all kinds of legal cases in which if a mother died, was murdered, and the baby died, a trial is going to happen for a double homicide,
Right.
where the law sees it, ultimately as a life that has been taken. And so in the killing of the innocent, there was a case maybe 20 years ago, the Scott Peterson case. It
Right.
was nationally public trial. He had an affair. He had a lover. He ended up trying to. He basically murdered his wife and the baby
Right.
at the same time, and he was tried for double homicide. And there are many cases in which that happens, and so that's what this is essentially acknowledging, that a child that is in the womb is deserving of equal legal protection. And I'll say exactly what you're saying in terms of coercion. We have a dear friend of the Freedom Center, friend of Liberty University, that is a part of the Students for Life organization, Christine Yergin. She has a story, a testimony, very public. She's shared this numerous times. She was coerced. She did not give in or yield, but she was coerced to have an abortion. The father of her first child
Mm.
had taken economic sort of measures and tried to pressure her to do that.
Right.
He's changed his mind. Both I think both have repented of their former life. I know she has, and I think he has as well. But that is to acknowledge the fact that for many people, there are forces at work where it might be parents, it might be a boyfriend, um, it might be joblessness or other kinds of things that are that people see as external pressures and say, "Oh, it'd just be easier to go along with this plan, and I'm gonna go ahead and just have this quick procedure, or I'm gonna take this pill
Right.
in order to deal with the problem." Your bill is addressing that essentially this is a human life, and in many ways, it's already acknowledged as such legally, but we have to be consistent with the full application of the law.
Right, exactly. And it's something that we see, most fundamentally, we think this is what God says. This is how we should treat life. We should treat, we should defend the fatherless. God says we should do justice for the fatherless. We should do that without partiality, meaning that we shouldn't just judge, in favor of one person just because they're stronger or just because they're born or just because they're this or they're that. We shouldn't judge, with partiality like that. God forbids that. He says he hates that. He says we should love our neighbor as ourselves. Originally, he said that just 3 verses after saying, "Don't show partiality and judgment." He says, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." And then, of course, Jesus repeats that later and says that that's the second greatest commandment. And so that's really our what's behind all that we're doing is seeking to love our neighbors as ourselves. What are the laws that protect our lives? We should want those same laws to protect the lives of others. And it's not just biblical; it's even constitutional. Right, even
Mhm.
you go to the Supreme Court, right there at the top when you go through the front doors, those giant doors that says equal justice under law. And then in the
Mhm.
Constitution, the 14th Amendment says no state shall deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Well, we believe that person simply means human being, and that from
Mhm.
the moment of fertilization, all of us should be protected by that, and states should not be denying equal protection. And so that's really
Yeah.
what these bills do, is seeking to establish what the Constitution requires, and most importantly, what God requires.
Since 1971, Liberty University has had one mission: training champions for Christ. We've been at this for a while, and in the shadow of the Blue Ridge Mountains, we have grown to be a global force. Today, Liberty runs over 100,000 students around the globe, studying across 15 colleges and schools.
And, among them, over 30,000 military students.
Across 700 programs of study, we train as one: nurses, artists, business leaders of the future and today. Together, we work to give back through service trips, local community work, and over 500,000 volunteer hours per year. And we play just as hard as we study, with 20 NCAA athletic programs and 40 club sports teams. So, who are we? We are Liberty University, and we train champions for Christ.
I want to go back to something June 24th, 2022. That's when the Dobbs decision came down at the Supreme Court. We at Liberty University Standing for Freedom Center, we were there on December 1st, 2021, when the oral arguments were given. We had over 1,000 students show up in support of life and praying there at the steps of the Supreme Court, gathered together. This was a fight that took place for more than 50 years. And we saw that day in which Roe was struck down. But it sort of exposed. There was a unified goal. There was a unified front, but it sort of exposed after the case, after the fact, when you go state by state by state, that not everybody had the same goal in fighting to end abortion. Maybe they had the same goal in fighting to end Roe,
Right.
but they didn't have the same aims and intents and purposes and the intensity of that fight for ending abortion all across the nation. And that was almost like that was the opening of the new front. And let me say this, Bradley, I kind of resented some of the remarks that some people said, like, we haven't even, there were people that were almost like talking about the last 50 years as though they didn't happen. The people that marched, the people that were a part of that movement, almost acting like there was no work that had actually really been done on the life issue. And I was like, no, that's absurd. That's insane. There were many brave people on that front line culturally for a long time. Many of them have gone to the grave, didn't see this happen. They did the work. They carried the cross. I appreciate so much. And so, not to spit on what they've done, but recognizing that this was the sort of the first true, like, milestone turning point in this fight, and recognizing the work is absolutely not finished. We can say that. But it's not as though the work had just begun.
Right.
A new work had begun. We have a new work. And so what is that next hill? What is that next step in this new work? What does this moment need? Certainly you've got HB 2197 in Texas, but what do we need across the country to sort of rally people and present a new unified front?
It's something that, um, now that Roe is out of the way, now the excuse is gone for many states. I think there are lots of legislators around the country that just said, well, my hands are tied. Supreme Court says I can't do this, which, our opinion was that it was unconstitutional from the beginning. States should have never complied with Roe. But now everybody agrees, right? Now even the Supreme Court agrees that Roe was unconstitutional. And so that's gone and out of the way, which we're grateful for. So that means there's nothing that's stopping the states from providing equal protection. There's no court case. There's nothing that stops them. Some states now are going the opposite direction with their own laws, right? We see some state Supreme Courts are somehow now, like the U.S. Supreme Court did in 1973, finding these rights, generic rights to privacy, in their laws, in their constitutions. We have to see some of that happening, but then we're also seeing states pass these ballot initiatives to enshrine abortion into their own constitution, and that's very troubling. But then there's lots of states where there's nothing like that happening, and there's nothing holding them back from actually providing equal protection, which is still needed. But I think a lot of people after Roe, they think that the work is done. They think that abortion is abolished in their state. There's 13 states that are now being called by many abortion-free, and it's one reason we produce a documentary about this, abortionfree.com, and people can find out about that. But we, they're not abortion-free. There's abortion still happening there. In some cases, even more abortions happening there. And overall, abortion numbers after Dobbs are higher now than they were even 15 years ago. And so a lot of people do think that the work is done and they've, spiked the football and declared victory, but there's still a whole lot left to do. And what needs to happen is equal protection in the states, but ultimately we need the president, Congress, and the Supreme Court all in agreement that the 14th Amendment applies here, and finding that a fetus is a person entitled to equal protection.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. There was a testimony, it went on social media, where a lawmaker was talking with you regarding religious exemption. I do want to highlight that. I don't have the clip to play right now, but it is on X. And essentially, someone asked you if you would be willing to offer religious exemption for those who wanted to have an abortion, right? And
Right.
you replied, and I think this is important for discussion. I've been having multiple discussions like this more recently regarding sort of religious liberty, right? But your response or your quip back was, would you allow a religious exemption for Aztecs who are willing to sacrifice children, right? And obviously we think of the insanity of that. Rampant paganism, child sacrifice, but it's not something that it's not like a fiction. This literally happened historically. There are parts of the world where this is still happening, where you have these cultic beliefs, wherever Christianity is gone, like to India and Sahara Africa and South America, that there has been the end of these sort of cultic religious practices. Everywhere where the missions movement happened with the gospel, this has happened. What's interesting is that in America, so often we've, under secularism, this idea that we need to have religious liberty and full equality, yet, and this is where I see in modern times we've actually gone to along with sort of the DEI movement in pluralism and multiculturalism, we're not actually promoting religious liberty. It's religious equity. And what I mean
Right.
is we have a majority Christian culture. I don't mean the majority of people in the United States are actually, by the biblical definition, born again, but the majority of people in the United States would at least identify as their heritage as Christian. They would identify as, no, I'm Christian. I've grown up in America. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. They might not have saving faith, but they at least identify for the sake of a Pew Research poll as Christian. And yet, religious equity in terms of exercise is we need to have an equal playing field where a Satanist, a pagan, a pro-abort, or whatever need to be equally represented along with one Christian. Oh, but the Christian in the room needs to be quiet and needs to sit in the back. All of these ideas that, religion needs to be separated, free exercise thereof needs to be separated from the public spaces. Oh, and you can't legislate morality. These are some of the biggest myths foisted upon the public. But I'm also seeing, Bradley, that it's many Christians who bought into this idea.
Right. Right. Yeah, this is a huge, huge problem that, and I like the way you put it, religious equity. Every society will have a standard upon which they base their laws. And the question is, for us, is that going to be the standards of God, the Bible, Scripture, or is that going to be the standards of secularism, humanism, or is it going to be the standards of some other religion? And this idea that somehow, well, we can just satisfy everybody and make everybody happy, that's impossible. We're seeing that. It's something that's never been possible throughout human history. But whenever we're handing over, the keys to our government to other religions, even, and I mean, they're not going to quote unquote tolerate our religion in the sense that, I mean, they're going to impose their own morality. But yeah, this entire idea, that we can just hand over the keys of government to all the other religions. I mean, they're not going to, they're going to impose their standards. So, and again, if we believe that Christ is King and Jesus is Lord and He is God, then we need to act like it. And His law is good. And so His law is not just good for us, it's good for everybody. It's not just good for Christians, it's good for everybody. And we should seek to impose that because that's what He says. That's what He tells us to do. And that's good for everybody. And so, we need to stop apologizing for that. We need to say, no, we are Christians and we are going to legislate as Christians, and God's law is good if used lawfully. And so we think that is what's best for America, and we need to not be afraid to say that.
So you're looking for a university that's perfect for you, a school that has anything you could possibly need.
Anything?
You want a place that has the programs you want to study, and maybe a few more, just in case you change your mind.
I think I'm going to sign up for the fashion design program.
All right. A place with state-of-the-art facilities. I mean, look at this campus.
And who doesn't love big-time sports?
And great recreational activities.
Okay, now we're on a roll. Somewhere you can hike, slide, strike, shoot, climb, eat, and most importantly, eat. You want a place that takes you to space? Okay, maybe not, but we can teach you how to fly, or pastor a church, or run a business. And all that with a great view? Yeah, I think I know a place.
Yeah, I think that's very, very clear. And the Christian truth claims are that Christ's kingdom has been established. It's incrementally increasing on earth. It is in the Lord's Prayer. And when we pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, we are literally a part of a ambassadorial mission in order to increase and establish Christ's rule and reign and His authority on earth. And there's a the Dutch prime minister from the 1800s, Abraham Kuyper, said not one precious square inch over all of the Earth's domain. That there's not one single area that is segregated off, but Christ, who is Lord over all, he says mine. It belongs to him. And so when we think about establishing laws like the Constitution, which, by the way, is a Christian document, it was established in a Christian way of thinking for a largely Christian world and a Christian order, a Christian way of understanding due process, and pre-existing rights that are given by God and not, but are recognized and protected by the government, but they come from God. During that time in which religious liberty was being articulated and expressed, you had blue laws, you had Sabbatarian laws, you had laws on the books that you couldn't blaspheme. By the way, if you're profaning the name of God, what does the Constitution swear by? Whose authority has been granted ultimately in the drafting of the Constitution? God himself. And so I think a lot of people, we're kind of living in this malaise where the fish tank that we're in is in need of a good scrubbing and a good cleaning, but we're all breathing the same bacterial-infested waters right now, which is modern secularism, and they have no answers for the strong men that are coming in and taking the country. They have no answers for Islam. They have no answers for militant wokeism. The only thing that they want to make sure of, and they're losing the plot, is that Christianity stay marginalized and largely silent, while everything else is going to heck, right?
Right.
And so I think it's important, like when we're talking about ending abortion, we're talking about not something that is just good for Christians, it's good for all of humanity.
Right.
Everyone it benefits in society. That means that sex is no longer consequence free. Immorality is no longer consequence free. Oh, but the child should not pay the burden by sacrificing its own life in order to make sure that a mother or a father or anyone else gets to walk away having no consequences for the decisions they've made.
We see in Scripture that one of the reasons that God judges nations is because of child sacrifice. That's why this issue of abortion is not just important for the child, although that would be enough, or for the mother, though that would be enough, but it's for the sake of our entire nation, because God says he judges nations for child sacrifice. He lists multiple reasons why he drove out the people of Canaan before the Israelites, and that was in all three lists, that they were committing child sacrifice. And how does the judgment come? It comes through, we see in kind of insanity. Romans 1 talks about God turning us over to a depraved mind, which we certainly see the woke insanity in our country. We see judgment comes through through bureaucracy or deep state because of the transgression of the land. Many are its princes, the scripture says. But then really ultimately we see the ultimate form of judgment is by invasion, right? God brings foreign countries and foreign peoples in to invade and to displace his people, or in this case, to displace the Canaanites, before his people because of this sin. And we're seeing that in our country. And so that's why this issue of child sacrifice is something that it is inviting and calling down God's judgment upon our country. It's, as the scripture puts it, it's polluting the land, and the blood of the innocent cries out for judgment. And if God says, if we don't provide justice, then he will, to those who are committing it and to the people of the land who allow it. And so that's why this is a national security issue that we deal with this. And it's important. I mean, even seeing here in Texas, a very conservative state, relatively speaking, we have, just in the past month, I've seen 2 different imams on the floor of the Texas House of Representatives being declared to be pastor of the day, right? And so we're seeing this happening around the country, and so that's why we need to be dealing with both, the idea that we can't have Christian standards, and we need to be dealing with the idea of child sacrifice and abolishing those.
I think throughout history, God's judgment has been manifest in different ways. As a nation, you go back to the 1780s, when you think about the Constitution coming together, many of the states had the opportunity at that time to eradicate slavery, in the institution of slavery. They didn't do so. And I think God's judgment came in the way of a civil war, 80 years later, because they delayed obedience. You look at the civil rights movement, and for all the things that were happening, there were righteous elements of that movement, but there are many unrighteous elements of that movement. And so Jim Crow, the era of Jim Crow and post sort of Civil War Reconstruction, in order to overturn that, people delayed obedience. And so when people don't do the right thing, God's judgment manifests. I think that we're dealing with what we're seeing right now in terms of wokeism, DEI, all that stuff is a manifestation of the judgment that came as a result of all of those prior movements in which, instead of pursuing righteousness and God's holy standard when it comes to law, when it comes to equal protection, all of that, as a result, we face his judgment, and it comes and it manifests in ways that we didn't foresee. And I absolutely agree that the rise of Islam and the threat of religious pluralism and other types of things it could very well be a judgment of God. The UK is experiencing this right now. Europe is experiencing this. And it's a natural judgment in the natural realm. I appreciate so much, Bradley, you coming on. Thank you so much for what you're doing at the Foundation to Abolish Abortion. I just want to commend you for your work, and I really appreciate your courage. So I want to say God bless you and Godspeed. Thank you for joining the Give Me Liberty podcast. Hey, did you find this helpful? I hope you did. Please like and subscribe, share with a friend, and also go to standingforfreedom.com where you can find more content, articles, podcasts, and our Theology of Politics series, all at standingforfreedom.com.